Just a moment, Julie's going to come up and talk to us a little bit about today's day of remembrance, today's day of trans remembrance, remembering all those trans and non-binary folk who we've lost this year, who we've lost to hate, who we've lost to violence, who we've lost to bigotry. Too many. If you haven't seen, we know that the attempted suicide rate amongst trans kids is sky high. And you know what brings it down to the level of cis kids? One affirming, loving adult in their lives. One. Which always breaks my heart because it means how many of these kids don't have one. And so that's what it means for so many of us on this trans day of remembrance, is to remember them for a blessing. And it means being agents who loudly, who vocally, who proudly proclaim that trans people belong in this space and in every space, who proudly and loudly and vocally will be that one. So Julie's going to come up in a moment, but I want to share another kind of remembrance. One of my very favorite stories from an incredible book by Noam Sienna called A Rainbow Thread. Noam Sienna is the son of the first woman rabbi in Canada, and he went through the last 2,000 years of Jewish history, and he pulled out stories of queer Jews. He pulled out a rainbow thread from a tradition that has too often pushed that thread away. It's a remarkable book that should be on every Jewish bookshelf. I really believe it. But one of the stories that I love comes from the 1930s. It was right after the Nazi Olympics. And there was evidently a phenomenon where folks would go off and compete in the women's games and come back as men. These athletes who would come back as men. And there was a whole brouhaha in the press, in the national press, about all of these folks who were transitioning. And much of the brouhaha was about, this may sound familiar, this new modern thing called trans people. Remember, this is in the 30s. And so there's an old man already in his late 80s who writes a letter to the editor in the Yiddish Daily Forward. You can still go to the forward.com, a Jewish newspaper, wonderful Jewish newspaper, that used to be in Yiddish. And so this old man writes a letter to the Daily Forward in Yiddish, and he says, "You crazy people who think that this whole trans thing is new, let me tell you a story about the shtetl. Let me tell you about a girl named Beulah, who was always a little different, who never quite fit in, who never, he says, felt comfortable in their skin. And Beulah went off and came back after studying with one of the sort of great German doctor philosophers of the moment, and comes back as Beryl to the shtetl, right? Remember, this is a letter in Yiddish in the 30s about the 1880s. And Beryl came back and was embraced by the community. And they taught Beryl to lead the prayers, to become a shaliach tzibur. Remember, this is a world where only men were counted in a prayer quorum. Only men were counted in a minyan. Only men were allowed to read and lead the prayers. And Beryl came back and was taught to lead the prayers. And Beryl came back and became an integral part of the community. And Beryl came back, and in the synagogue, with the rabbi officiating underneath the chuppah, married Rachel. And the two of them grew old together, Beryl and Rachel. In the 1930s, an old man sent this letter to the editor, to the Daily Forward. May Beryl's memory be for a blessing.
Good morning. Shabbat Shalom. My name is Julie Williams. My pronouns are she, hers, and I'm a member of the LGBTQ Havara here at CRC. And I just want to take a moment to talk about the Transgender Day of Memorial, and honor those we've lost in this last year to violence and suicide. I am the proud mother of 3 adult daughters who are all wonderful, accomplished, compassionate, and wise. One of those daughters is transgender, and she is courageous and a truth teller and a heroine of mine. So, but you know, I know from experience that that our transgender children, siblings, and elders live a life of peril. In all honesty, they have to find a way to survive and thrive in a society and a system that isn't ready to acknowledge them and affirm them. And sadly, many times they must struggle to survive in families and faith communities who also do not affirm them. Far too many are lost to violence and suicide, more than we know, because the way our system is set up, our death certificates do not have a space for gender identity. Death certificates do not have space for chosen names. So many are misgendered in death and erased to posterity. So in light of that, I'm going to read the names of those lost to violence here in the United States that we know of so far this year, because saying their names has power and has meaning. And remembering them and honoring them and witnessing their lives and their loss is an act of courage and humility that I think is important. There are 46 names altogether. 39 of them are women. 40 of them are people of color, and all lost too young just for being who they are. So their names are Tiana Davaria Alexander, Samuel Edmund Damian Valentine, Bianca Muffin Banks, Dominique Jackson, 50 Bands, Alexis Braxton, China Carrillo, Jeffrey J.J. Bright, Jasmine Kennedy, Jenna Franks, Adalyn Evans, Diamond Kyrie Sanders, Rayana Pardo, Jada Peterson, Dominique Luscious, Remy Fennel, Tiara Banks, Jaharia Dialto Balenciaga, Natalia Smoot, Iris Santos, Tiffany Thomas, Kerry Washington, Thomas Harden, Whispering Wind Bear Spirit, Sophie Vasquez, Danny Henson, Serenity Hollis, Poe Delwyn Black, Oliver Ollie Taylor, Tiara Marie Lewis, E.J. Boykin, Taya Ashton, Shai Vanderpump, Miss Coco, Pooh Johnson, Zoella Martinez, Desaya Manet, Brianna Ulmer, Kier Solomon, Mel Groves, Royal Poetical Stars, Jesse Hart, Joe Acker, Ricky Autumuro, Jenny De Leon, Marquisha Lawrence. We say their names and we honor their lives and their memories. So, because this is CRC and because we are who we are, I want to end on a message of hope. As Rabbi Daniel cited, the Trevor Project engaged in a study that actually demonstrated, looking at 8,000 transgender youth, that the risk of suicide decreases by 40% if we can just acknowledge, if we just use the right pronoun, you know? Just be an ally. It doesn't take a lot. A little bit can mean a lot. And in a system that is set up, you know, to make it hard. My daughter, I'll tell you one brief story, Alice, who is truly courageous and amazing and awesome, at the age of 15, was overcome with despair. She was years away from gender-affirming surgery, which was absolutely imperative for her, and she was depressed and isolated socially and sadly attempted to take her life, and she was placed in a hospital away from me, literally labeled with a hospital bracelet with the wrong name and the wrong gender. And the psychiatrist treating her couldn't see the irony. Like, this is the whole problem, that she's not seen for who she is. This system is reinforcing that. And believe me, I was on fire to fix it. We had an attorney write a letter and get it changed, and they did. They did change it, even though the legal process hadn't been done yet. That day, the bracelet was changed, and Alice could breathe. She wasn't literally labeled with the identity that wasn't right. But the good news is we don't have to fight and change the healthcare system. We don't have to fight and change our government. We just need to extend ourselves and be an ally and see our trans children, siblings, and elders for the wonderful, courageous people that they are. And it does make a difference. And finally, the last thing I'll say is that for myself, for the LGBTQ Havurah, for my family, for all of our trans children, siblings, and elders, I see you. You matter. I affirm you. I celebrate you. And I will walk by your side every day and twice on Sunday. So there you have it. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie.